Hello, friends, and welcome to this podcast, this confusing and ambiguous podcast. I'm going to do my best to talk about music in a way that's not too confusing or ambiguous or boring. But I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos where people talk about music. They hold up their records and they talk about what they love about their favorite music, their favorite bands, favorite records. And I thought, I love that. I love seeing these regular people like me, people that I'd probably be friends with, and they're holding up these records and I'm like, I love that one too. And the next one they hold up, it's like, that's one of my favorites too. And you feel like you found friends out there on the YouTubes. And so hopefully that's what I can maybe try to do that a little bit. Hopefully, there's an album that a lot of people bring up as there's those 10 favorite, my Desert Island, the albums I can't live without kind of videos. One record that always pops up on those lists, and rightfully so, it is certainly on my list, even though I don't really like to rate or create lists of favorites and those kind of things and rate and rank and all that. I have things that I love and things that I don't really bother with, and that's how I categorize. But there are things that do have a special place in my music heart, and are usually can be found somewhere very close to my turntable. And one of those, which is on all the lists, this is going to be no surprise at all. This album by this band. It is phenomenal. It is the product of a genius. When you listen to this, you feel like you're listening to something that was kind of has a homemade feel to it because it's got that sense of having been created by someone who wasn't being directly inspired by something else. It's hard to explain that feeling. But I feel like this record has that, but it's a kind of a thing where you can feel it when it's there or when it's not there. I feel like I can. Someone who's creating something, someone who's inventing. I think Brian Wilson was inventing sounds on this record, inventing soundscapes and methods of recording that give this record an ambience and a vibe and a feeling and a mood that other people I think maybe have tried to get and never really found it. There's a few Beach Boys albums that have that kind of feel to it, and I'm not just talking about those Beach Boys harmonies and the Surf's Up kind of stuff. There is a sense of melancholy to some of these songs, and as you know, I'm sure you've heard this record. It's got some heartbreaking sort of, those moments of nostalgia that you feel when you listen to this album that, wouldn't it be nice? It's such a sweet song. And then you have, God Only Knows. And I Know There's an Answer. I Just Wasn't Made for These Times. Those songs that Caroline No, those songs that you listen to and they just break your heart. They're so beautiful, and the ideas in the songs are so rooted in like teenage nostalgia, and I know he's used that term, the teenage idea, and the whole California thing, and this record just has all that. And I think there's a quality to the sound, to the audio quality, the production quality. The audio quality on this is really nice, of course, but the production quality, the production techniques that he was using in the studio, the types of microphones and the types of reverb units that they were using, the distance that the microphones were from the amplifiers. I know that may be a little technical, but it's stuff that you feel like you can hear. If you know how recordings are made, I listen to this record and I can kind of feel like I feel like I can kind of hear how the mics were placed in the room. You kind of get a sense when you put the headphones on. I can kind of imagine the room that this was recorded in. It's got a definite organic, homemade kind of feel to it that I just love. And that's what I think gives this record in some ways. I mean, aside from the brilliant songwriting and the brilliant playing and the incredible singing, those things are a given. But in addition to that, I think this record has that, has an ambience that really gets into your soul. There's a type of spring reverb that you hear in some of the rhythms on this, and things like that kind of make you feel like you're in the room. I don't know, but it also came out during a time when a lot of people were experimenting in recording studios, like that other band that starts with a B. Around this time, they were experimenting with instruments, like bringing instruments that weren't normally in rock bands into that recording studio. George Martin was playing harpsichords and things like that on the Beatles albums, and there's horns and all kinds of instruments on here that you might not expect, at least if you were buying records, as a young person in these days. It would have sounded so new and strange to your ears probably. But definitely, if you don't have this album, if you're one of those people who has not heard this or doesn't own it in some form, you really should. Simple as that. But there's another band that was around the time that this, around those years, those experimental years, that I really like, that doesn't get the same level of attention that the Beach Boys and the Beatles did. But they put out an album called Odessey and Oracle, which has a classic psychedelic cover that I think if you turn on the black light, it animates and comes to life and dances around your room or something. It's got such a groovy psychedelic cover. How can you resist this album? But it's by the band The Zombies, who had previously been kind of a standard, British invasion-ish kind of pop band with the guitars and the bass and the drums and notably keyboards, and just an amazing band. Their pop songs were so good and so fun and so 60s, but then that psychedelic kind of thing crept into music, partly because of the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the availability of certain substances, perhaps. But this record appears to be psychedelic, has some of the trappings of the psychedelic movement in as far as they were experimenting with instrumentation, experimenting with some aspects of songwriting. But what this album is, I think, is a brilliant pop album. It is like a power pop album. The songs on here are so catchy and so upbeat. It's almost like sugar pop, It's almost like bubblegum pop in a way. I won't go that far, but it's got that kind of vibe to it where the songs are so happy, and there's some not so happy songs on here, but the songs are. It's got a litany of incredible songs on here, beautifully recorded, and they're just catchy pop songs that have a little bit of that the charm of newly discovered recording studio techniques and things like that. I love this album. I put this one on pretty regularly, and it just every time I put it on, I stop everything else that I'm doing and I listen to it, and I'm like, God, these are such great songs. So well written. The keyboard playing is incredible. The brilliant Rod Argent on here, and you got your the voice, the Colin singer, incredible, guitar, drums, bass, but the lyrics on here are great. There's some really fun lyrics about a love song involving a prison sentence and things like that, and some sort of like historical lyrics and things. It goes all over the place. Lyrically, it's a trip through the psychedelic landscapes, but not so psychedelic. I have a feeling that the Zombies probably weren't big users. You know what I mean? I think they were a little bit more into being in the recording studio and working on their music, and because they're obviously quite good at it. You know, songwriting. There's a lot of time put into the songwriting on this album and the recording. But you know, people don't talk about this one when they talk about the great albums of the '60s. They talk about, you know, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. They talk about Pet Sounds. They talk about a few of the other classics, Jimi Hendrix and various others. This one doesn't always get brought up, but I want to put it in that pantheon of classic '60s albums. And I also would like to remind folks that the Zombies are actually still out there, still touring, and still doing shows as of this recording. I just saw Colin Blunstone doing a song with a current band, a current incredible pop band called the Lemon Twigs, where he actually, you know, they were playing the music and Colin was singing, and his voice is absolutely undamaged by the years. He sings perfectly. He hits those high notes with confidence, the confidence of a guy in his 20s. Seriously, amazing singer. The Zombies, folks, love the Zombies. This one and all their records, everything they did is pretty great. Their early stuff has more of that '60s pop vibe to it, like some of the early Beatles albums. But still great songwriting, still worth listening to, still worth getting into as far as the, you know, your '60s pop, you know. But this one has that added element of those fantasy elements of different kinds of instrumentations and a little bit more experimentation with the songwriting and the voices, and just a great album. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for joining me. Go out and buy yourself a Zombies album. Take care.